As a child, I was very allergic to pollens and foods, and I was very often missed school because of illness. So I was really, I would say, I related to anything that was medical. I had treatments at the hospital, the Jefferson Hospital, so I liked the ambiance of the doctor's offices and the nurses, and so I think that that influenced me in caring, doing a career in caring for other people. And I would say that when I was doing my training, I was very, very happy. It was what I was meant to do. And so I continued. When as far as going into school nursing, I did that mostly. It wasn't my first choice because I would have preferred doing hospital care or some specialty. But by that time, I was married and had children. So school nursing became something that helped me to do both, to be home for my children, to be home in the summers, and yet do as much of the nursing part as I could. So that was good. I did ultimately, I I think I must have done a great job because I was chosen as Nurse of the Year. And I ended up being one of the nurses that was sent back to school. And I did school nurse practitioner. And that kind of satisfied me to the point where I was not sorry that, making that choice. I think back sometimes as the strength of a woman in my time, and I often think of my grandmother, who back in Italy had, I think six. Well, she ended up taking 6 children over here from Italy. But when she decided to come, my grandfather had wished before that to come here without the family and find a job and a place to live. And my grandmother said, no, we come together as a family. I often think of that because I think she was a very strong woman to do that, to take that step to come to a new country with all those children and really not knowing how or why, how they were going to live, but they did it. Now, he was a gun maker, so I assume that he found a job when he got here. In those days, they did have make guns, so I guess that's what he did. I'm not sure about that. But I think she was a very strong person. And she taught also. She was home, like in those days, girls went to a teacher to learn embroidery and sewing and things like that. And that's what she did. She taught imagine in those days. And her name was Maria. I often think that she must have really been a marvelous person. Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting the stories The stories that we tell ourselves are just as powerful as the stories we tell others, oftentimes. So the story you tell yourself about your grandmother, and that others have told you about her,
Oh, yeah,
have also made you believe.
that's right. That's right. It's nice to know about that is one of the good things of knowing about your legacies and your families that came before you. Because from someone or somehow you would get to do or to learn that you could do more than you thought you could. And I believe that. And I think it all comes from self-esteem is one of them that I think you just think of yourself as being able to do what you dream about doing. And why not? As I said before, if somebody else did it, I think you can do it too. Yeah, you can do anything. I said to Uncle Roddy one time, I remember he came home from school and he said he didn't do very well in a reading test. And I said, there's no reason why, you just have to think of learning to do what you want to do. And so we gave him a little help, and the teacher said, Roddy, you can be anything you want to be. And it was true. He said he wanted to be a doctor, and he is a doctor. So that was it.
So you knew your grandmother?
No,
None of your
just
neither?
stories, no.
And any of your grandfathers?
I knew my father's parents. I knew them. They lived in Connecticut. He was they were already elderly when I met them. Well, when I was married, I met them when I was younger. My grandmother was Conchetta. That was her name, and he was Vincent, I think. Pretty sure. Anyway, I met them just by visiting and going. They lived in Connecticut, New Haven, and I think they were retired really when I first met them. That probably was when I was just a little girl. My mother took me to see them, and there was my father had sisters, and he had two brothers. One was Louis. The other was Jimmy, which I think was really a nickname for Vincent. There were a lot of Vincents in the family. And there was an aunt, Teresa, and there was two others, I think, but I don't remember their names. That's it.
And your father died when you were how old?
I was 16. It was before I graduated high school. He was 54. He had heart disease, heart failure. And he was a lot like Papa. He was very gentle, very loving. He was happy that I wanted to go into nursing. And he died before I graduated. I didn't go to commencement because I had to start school. It was wartime. The war had been declared. So I had to go into I started in June, which was earlier than the normal admission time, which would have been September. And because of that, I missed the commencement. But it was with the permission of the school. They knew that I was going into the school. And when I did, I started at Penn. and I lived on the campus, which was really very nice experience. Let's see, it was a small class. We were called the June class. Yeah. So,
And do you remember what your father smelled like?
what my father was
What he smelled like?
smelled like.
Mm-hmm.
I think he just smelled like love. He was just, my father was just sweet. He was really, I think, I often look at like your father and DeBianca's father. They all, I mean, Joe, like Joe and your father, and Uncle Vince and Uncle Roddy. They must have had good role models because they're all of the same, almost like a mold. They're all wonderful, gentle, loving, good parents, and that's how my father was. He was very demonstrative as far as love was concerned, which was really not the norm at that time. The fathers they weren't so loving, most fathers. They really weren't, but he was. I can't speak enough about being connected with family. I, I could not, to me, I don't understand how, like, a brother and sister could not speak to each other, or cousins could not be disconnected with each other. I was very close to my sister because she was actually 9 years older than I. So she was almost like a mother to me. But then, you know how when you get older, your ages, you come together. So we became friends when she got married, and by that time, I was getting ready to go into nursing school. So when she died, it was very tragic to me, very traumatic, very traumatic. And her husband was not able to handle the situation very well. So we were disconnected for a long time. But it was always in the back of my mind to bring everybody together. And maybe you don't remember, I'm not sure. But a few years back, not too long ago, I invited them all here. And I explained to the boys when they were here how it happened that we separated. And it was mostly because their father psychologically could not handle the fact that his wife died. Because he was a doctor and he was trying to put the blame on someone. Didn't know how to do that. And he ended up blaming my mother. So there was really like a family breakup for a while. But then he did come around he came, when the youngest boy was married, they came to visit my mother. And that kind of helped a little bit. But we finally got together, so. And it was important for me because a family, there's nothing like family. You've got, to remember that your friends, you can have a wonderful, wonderful friend, but then something happens and that's the end of the friendship. But your family is always, they don't go away.
So,
My book was actually being sure that it was accurate, and I feel that it was. Some of it was sad, and it caused me to be sad because I was remembering my life in the past. And not that it was a sad life, it's just that the memories were emotional to me. I had a most difficult time with writing actually closer to the end, when it was a memory of me and Pop-Pop's life together. Yeah. The last question, which I don't really remember at the moment, what would I wish if I had my wish, and it was to be with him. And that was difficult for me. And it was mentioned to me by someone who read it that I could have maybe elaborated on that question, but emotionally I couldn't. It was too difficult.
yeah, the question was, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would it be?
Yeah. Well, that question was what I'm talking about right now, because that would have been my choice to have dinner with Pop-Pop. But I did have dinner with a lot of my children and grandchildren, which brought me a lot of happiness. So that balanced out, I think.
Can you tell me about the first house you lived in?
We were looking for a house that would be close to Pop-Pop's work when the houses in the Girard estate came up for sale. Those houses were in support of the Girard College. And the Girard College was for boys with no fathers. And in order to buy the house, we had to rent it first, because that was in the will that Stephen Girard left when he died. So we did that, but it only turned out to be a month or maybe 2 months at the most, and that was our first house. And it was a nice house. It was down in Girard Estate. It was 4 bedrooms, and yeah, it was a very nice house. We lived there until we moved to Havertown. And that was because of the school district. I preferred the suburban school.
When's the first time you drove a car?
First time I drove a car, I wanted my brother to teach me. Before we were married. Before I was married. I don't remember the date, but he didn't have the patience to do it. I went with him for a little bit, but it didn't turn out to be, it wasn't good. So when Uncle Vince was 2 years old, that would have been 47, 48, 49, 51, 1951. Pop took me in the car and made me drive around City Hall on a busy night. And that's how I learned to drive. So that was my first. And it was stick shift.
Would you say it was trial by fire?
Very much. Yeah, but I did it, yeah. And then he bought me a car.
Do you remember what that first car was?
It was a small, might have been a Fiat, but I'm not sure. No, it was a Chevy, small Chevy. And it was good. I drove down the shore, and that was my first. Yeah, Uncle Vince was 2 years old. Was when we moved to Girard Estate.
Was it usual for women to drive in 1951?
Not too many. And there was a lot of parking, so I was okay. I liked driving. I was good at it. And let's see, as soon as I got when I got my license, that was an experience. I failed the first time. And I was very upset about that because I didn't think I should have failed. So I went back the next day. And they asked me, why did you come back so soon? I said, because I don't think I should have failed. So I got in the car and I passed the second time.
Where do you think you got a can-do attitude from?
Where did I get it from?
Your can-do attitude. Where'd you get it from?
My attitude. I think I have always had a good self-esteem. And my philosophy was always, if somebody else can do it, I can do it. And I think I even passed that on to my children and grandchildren. That if somebody else can do it, I think you can do it too. And I think that gave me confidence and leadership in my life to do things that at that time I did things that the women my age didn't. And one of them was to go to college, go to school, you know. A lot of them just got married and had children, and that was their lifestyle. But I wanted more. And that was, at one time I was toying with the idea of either teaching or nursing. We didn't have a whole lot of, my mother didn't have a whole lot of money. My father had already died. So I think that influenced my decision. But I really did want to be a nurse more than I wanted to teach. And in the end, I did both, so it was good. Well, barriers were lots of things that women didn't do. Like, for instance, they didn't drive. That was one thing. They didn't go to college. They didn't go to school. I wanted that. That was really, I was not satisfied with. I remember very distinctly the day that I had decided that I wanted to be a nurse. And I told my mother that this is what I wanted to do with myself. Well, she got very upset because I was ready to graduate from high school. And she thought that I should just go get a job, not go to school. And I said no, that wasn't going to happen. So that wasn't such a happy time between us. So I didn't share with her because I knew that she wouldn't support me. So I, in the end, got accepted to school. I only had to pay for my shoes, and that was it. I was in. And it was a big fight, but I went. I did it. She was proud of me when I finished. She was. And, but she gave me a hard time. Yeah, she gave me a hard time.